Aloha and welcome to Botany 101. I'm Angela Nishimoto, your host for this tour. Okay, so today, we're doing the fungi, part 2. Okay, so today we hope to cover a survey of, finish the survey of true fungi and also cover the lichens. Okay, that's what we hope to, that's the scope of what we hope to do today. Okay. Now, where we left off, we were talking about the basidiomycetes or the basidiomycota, the club fungi. Okay, we had to stop in the middle of that. Okay, so out of 25,000 species of club fungi, less than 75 species are poisonous. Okay, but many of these poisonous species are common. All right, and they're not that easily distinguished from the edible species. Some edible ones can make you sick if you eat them with alcohol, all right? And poisoning from Amanita, okay, the poison is from alpha-amanitin alkaloid, all right? What it does is it blocks RNA synthesis. And you remember from protein synthesis that we talked about before, right? That DNA codes for RNA, that codes for protein. Right? So if RNA synthesis is actually blocked, your body can't make its enzymes or proteins, so of course you'll die. Okay? So if we can get back to the slides. Okay? Never ever eat wild mushrooms unless identified by an expert. Okay? Now some of the treatment actually for mushroom poisoning, they'll usually pump your stomach and they'll give you some kind of activated charcoal to try to absorb the toxins, okay? By the time you get your symptoms, which include very painful abdomen, violent vomiting, and headache, it might be too late. Okay, so like I said, never eat mushrooms unless they're positively identified by an expert, okay? Okay, now, Teonanacatl, okay, so it's a human and ecological relevance of the fungi. Okay, of the basidiomycota. Okay, Teonanacatl means God's flesh, sacred mushrooms, psilocybe cyanescens. Okay, so this has been used in religion and ceremonies. Okay, and it's continued among natives of Central America and Mexico, even unto today. Okay, and it's reported that small amounts ingested, eaten, okay, induce sharply focused, vividly colored visions. And of course, a lot of people are like that, you know, but especially in religion. You know, they think that it's God, you know, communicating with you. Okay. Now, in the Western world, the fly agaric in Russia and India, okay, in the old world, they use it similar to this Teonanacatl, okay, the psilocybe mushroom. Okay. And so what happens is that users go into a state of intoxication, okay? And in Russia and in India, this dates back many centuries BC. Now people sort of found out that the intoxicating principle is actually passed through the urine. So there are actually people who even today will drink the urine of somebody who has ingested fly agaric so they can get the hallucinogen into their body, which is kind of way out there. Okay. Now, 90% or more than 90% of mushrooms is water. Okay. Most have much less nutritionally valuable substances than most food except for the shiitake mushrooms. Okay. They have double the protein of ordinary mushrooms. Okay, they're the exception. Okay. They're rich in calcium, phosphorus, and iron. Okay. They have B vitamins, vitamin D2, vitamin C. Okay. Excellent flavor. In fact, the ancient Chinese people, ancient Chinese royalty, believed that eating shiitake would retard the aging process, would keep you from aging. Okay, and I know that some people try to eat shiitake for health reasons today. Okay. Now, mushrooms have been cultivated for food since ancient times. Okay. In the 2nd century BC, this is 200 years before the Common Era. Okay, or the 2nd century BC, by the year 1. Okay, this fellow named Nicandros, he was a Greek doctor. Okay, what he did is he grew mushrooms under fig trees on soil and manure, and he taught people how to do it too. So that as far as we know, is the first time that people in the West tried to cultivate mushrooms. Now, there's only one species that's extensively cultivated, the portobello mushroom, okay, Agaricus bisporus, okay. So others are gaining popularity, such as shiitake or oyster mushroom, so they're starting to get more widespread propagation techniques for them. Okay. Now, large-scale operations that do mushroom propagation use windowless warehouses. Okay, and these have stacked rows of shallow beds. Okay, and they have temperature and humidity is easier to control in a building like this. Okay, and they're grown on compost or straw and either horse or chicken manure. Okay. And first of all, this compost is first pasteurized. That means it's heated at a relatively low temperature, okay, for a length of time to destroy microbes, fungi, and insects. Remember who pasteurized is named after? Louis Pasteur, right? So they're pasteurized to destroy microbes, unwanted fungi, and insect eggs and insect larvae. Okay. Then they're inoculated with spawn, and spawn is a compact mycelium that has been sown on grain. Okay, so they have their own language, just like every business or every kind of business you want to go into. Okay, then they're covered with soil. Okay, and the moisture is controlled with frequent watering, so they maintain a humidity of about 75%. Okay, and they keep the temperature between 48 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, because at this temperature they're less subject to diseases or insect infestation. Okay, also the mushrooms are firmer under cool conditions. Okay, so there are 436,000 tons of mushrooms produced per year in the United States. Okay, and Kennett Square is known in Pennsylvania, is known as the mushroom capital of the world. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go over to the demo station here, and we're going to take a look at some fungi. Okay, so here we are. Yes, so here we have, I dare not unwrap this. This is actually some bread. Okay, with bread mold on it. It's a little hard to see, but it's sort of wet in here, moist from the bread. But we have different kinds of fungi growing here, with the black parts of it probably being the sporangia. And there's another section here that's sort of like a greenish yellow that are also probably sporangia here too. Okay, and the rest of it is sort of like a dull bluish green. We don't want to take it out of the bag because you don't want to unleash these fungi into the studio. So this is actually representative of the zygomycetes that we talked about earlier. Okay. Now here we also have some shelf fungi, which are basidiomycetes. Okay. Here's actually showing some that were growing on this branch. You can see it's actually fused with the bark of this branch. Okay. And more shelf fungi, very beautiful. Okay. They say fungi are unpigmented, but generally what do you see? You see that they're not green. Okay, so fungi do not do photosynthesis. Another shelf fungus. And here we have a mushroom, like a typical mushroom you see at the grocery store. Okay, so I'm going to open it up. So these aren't actually These are actually hyphae that are interwoven with each other, making up the fungal mycelium that grew to make this mushroom. If you actually take this off, you can see there are gills underneath here, and these are where the basidiospores are produced. Remember that these are basidiomycetes, the club fungi. Yeah? So if you actually open them up, you can see that we have the spore producing areas here on the mushroom. Okay? Okay, we'll go back. Okay, here we are back again. Okay? Anyway, so that's the end of the basidiomycetes for us this time, and now we're going to get into the phylum Deuteromycota. Okay? And these are also known as the deuteromycetes, or the imperfect fungi. Okay, they're imperfect because they have no sexual stage. Remember, a perfect flower has both male and female parts in it, and imperfect fungi have no sex. Okay? So there are a bunch of many unrelated fungi in what they call an artificial phylum because they're not really related to each other. Okay, they're like a catch-all group, phylum. Okay? It's actually an informal group. It's not a taxonomic unit. It doesn't actually call relationships, and it's a catch-all phylum. Okay? And what you see here are conidia. Okay, so the most reproduce via conidia, and that's what you see here with all those spores on it there. Isn't that a beautiful photograph? Okay, one group of these deuteromycetes are parasites on protozoans. These are single-celled animals or protists, okay, and other small animals. Okay, some develop a body inside the victim and absorb nutrients until the victim dies. It sounds like a horror fest here, huh? And then they'll produce spores that stick to or are eaten by the next victim. Okay. Now others catch prey on sticky hyphae like amoebas. Okay, they adhere to them. Okay. One group in the soil captures nematodes. These are roundworms in the soil. In rings, they like lasso them and hold them tight, and then they'll begin to exude digestive enzymes to digest them while they're alive. Okay? So the fungus actually produces certain kind of rootlet sort of structures, haustoria, that invade the worm's body and digest it. So it's pretty gory, you know? Okay? Now, some of the species of deuteromycetes live in ant and termite nests, okay? And these insects will cultivate the fungus, all right? They'll bring in leaves, okay? They'll bring in other plant debris. They'll bring in caterpillar dropping, okay? They'll bring their own fecal material, okay, to make a very rich medium. Okay, they also lick the hyphae and use them as food. Okay. Now some other deuteromycetes are mycorrhizal fungus that are associated with the roots of plants. You know, many higher plants, but also the lower vascular plants, and also the non-vascular plants too have mycorrhizal fungi associated with them. Okay, they're especially important for older plants. Okay, they increase the area around the roots and may be more important than root hairs. Remember root hairs, you talked about root hairs before? May be more important than root hairs for getting water and minerals to the plant. Okay. Now these penicillium molds secrete an antibiotic, okay, which was first observed by Alexander Fleming in 1929. Okay, so he noticed that certain bacteria would not grow under or near under conditions where the mold was present. Okay, but his findings were not really considered very important until World War II. Okay, you had American and British scientists in Peoria, Illinois. What happened was the war created a need for quantities of better medications for infections from wounds, and also for sexual transmitted diseases for the soldiers. Okay. So what did they do? They began with cultures that were gotten from Fleming. Okay. They're very expensive to get, and they only gave a little bit of the active principle that killed the bacteria. Okay. So the scientists actually sent out a call nationwide all throughout the United States to please send in any piece of moldy, anything with a blue or a green mold on it. Okay, so they had trainloads of trash, moldy trash being sent to Peoria, Illinois. Okay? So they actually got a moldy cantaloupe. That was the one that had the most of the penicillin produced. So it had 25 times the penicillin that was produced by culture. Okay? So then they grew the moldy cantaloupe's mold in culture. They isolated a strain with 80 times the amount of penicillin that was in the original culture of penicillin that Alexander Fleming had, subjected it to x-rays. So what do x-rays do? Okay, x-rays can actually cause mutations. So what they did is they actually developed penicillin that had 225 times that of Fleming's mold, which is absolutely amazing. Okay, and since World War II, of course, there are hundreds of antibiotics that have been developed with a worldwide, very burgeoning worldwide industry, and that is probably part of the reason why there's so many people on the planet. It's because so many people don't die of infections anymore due to the antibiotics. Okay. Now, penicillium molds are used to make cheeses as well. Camembert, Roquefort, Gorgonzola, Stilton. Doesn't that make you feel hungry? Okay. Might not make you feel hungry when you think that it's actually fungi that helps make the cheese, but they are good. You can eat them, you know? Okay. So what do? They produce enzymes that break down proteins and fats in milk. Okay. So that's all that veining that you see in there, the blue and the green veining in all these cheeses. That's all fungi, okay, or digested proteins and fats with the fungi. Okay, looks good though. Yeah, they're expensive cheeses. Okay. Now in the 1980s, cyclosporine was developed. They're actually used from an imperfect fungus from soil. Okay. And they're for organ transplants. What it does, it suppresses the immune reactions to people that undergo surgery, okay, that can cause tissue rejection, okay? So you can have tissue rejection of transplanted organs without, you can actually stop that, okay, without the risk of leukemia and other serious side effects that are associated with other drugs. It's like a miracle drug. I had one fellow in one of my classes, and he had just had a kidney transplant, okay, and he said he was on cyclosporine, and that really helped him. He seemed really happy. He really seemed like somebody who had been near death and really was enjoying life, and this was soon after he'd had his kidney transplant. And so it was cyclosporine that did it. Unfortunately, when it suppresses your immune system, it also makes you vulnerable to other infections, as well. But still, he was a really happy guy. He's alive, I think, even today. Okay. Now, Aspergillus is a genus whose species produce dark brown or blackish or yellow spores. Okay. They're closely related to the penicillin molds. Okay. And Aspergillus is used to produce citric acid, which is used as a food flavoring, of course. It's also used in ink manufacturing. It's used in medicines even. Okay, of course, citric acid, right? Vitamin C. And even chicle substitute in chewing gum. There's a plant called chicle that was made into chewing gum. So it's even used as a chicle substitute in chewing gum. Also, gallic acid is produced, okay, for photographic developers, for dyes, and for black ink, okay. Also artificial flavorings and perfumes. And other uses include plastics, toothpaste, amazingly, and soap. Okay, all from this fungus, or these fungi. Okay. Also shoyu, what they do is they ferment the soybean. Okay, there's some shoyu on the left and some soybeans on the right. Okay, so ferments soybeans with a fungus. They also make miso using fungus, okay, using soybeans, salt, and rice. Okay, there's 500,000 tons of miso consumed every year. Okay. Now, diseases include aspergillosis, which infect the respiratory tract. Oftentimes the spores are inhaled. Okay, one type thrives on and in ears. Okay, which sounds kind of gross, right? Now, Aspergillus flavus secretes something called aflatoxin. Okay, aflatoxin is very serious. It's the most potent natural carcinogen known. Okay, so in foods, no more than 50 parts per billion is allowed in food. Okay, it can cause liver cancer. Right? Now, in humid climates, like in the southeastern United States or in Mexico, okay, if you have improperly stored grain, okay, if it's moist enough, okay, you can actually infect peanuts, peanut butter, peanut-based dairy feeds, okay, and can become carcinogenic. So, I know that I had a botany professor who actually thought that probably it's not too good to eat too many peanuts or peanut butter or peanut products, even though it is good food just as long as you're not allergic to it. But peanuts are kind of hard to digest too at the same time. Yeah, but it is high protein, and it's relatively inexpensive. So it's a way you can feed people, but still you have this aflatoxin, you need to be aware of. Okay. We also have valley fever, coccidioidomycosis. Okay, it's caused by coccidioides immitis. Okay, and it has to do with an inhalation of this. And so this valley fever happens in the drier areas of the southwestern United States. Okay, it produces lesions in the upper respiratory tract and lungs. And some fungi are used for biological controls, like controlling scale insects in warm, humid climates. Okay. Also controlling water hyacinths, that pesky weed, water weed, okay, in mild tropical climates. Okay. Okay, next, we're going to talk about lichens. Okay, that has to do with the symbiosis. You remember what symbiosis means? Okay. Sym means together, biosis means living. So it's actually living together. A fungus and an alga, or a fungus and a cyanobacterium living together. Okay, they're associated in a symbiosis. Okay, the telltale thing about this is neither the fungus or either the alga or cyanobacterium grows independently where the lichen grows. Okay, so a lichen is a symbiotic entity. It's a symbiotic organism. It consists of a fungus and an alga, or a fungus and cyanobacterium. Okay, so they're not that big. Okay, but they can grow to be large, but 6.5 feet. Anyway, so it can range in 0.04 inches to 6.5 feet. And usually, if they're that big, they're ancient, thousands of years old. Okay, so what happens in the symbiosis? The photosynthetic agent, the green alga or cyanobacterium, supplies the food to the fungus, and the fungus helps protect the other one from high light levels. Okay, and that can increase the rates of photosynthesis. Okay, and or the fungus can help increase the rates of photosynthesis, and it helps absorb water and minerals. Okay, but generally when they live together, generally you can kind of say that the fungus is kind of parasitic on the alga or cyanobacterium. Okay. So there are about 14,500 species of lichens, okay, and about 20 species of which are associated with a club fungus, okay. One species known associated with a bacterium, okay. Others are associated with sac fungi, okay. So there are about 100 species of algae or cyanobacteria, okay, and what they do is they'll actually be identified, the lichens will be identified according to what fungus or what composes a fungal component, okay. So they grow very slowly, at most less than half an inch per year, okay, at most, with the fastest growing ones. Okay, they can live thousands of years. They can live 4,500 years or more. Okay, and they're tolerant of a very wide range of conditions. They can live in bare rocks, in the blazing sun. They can live from there all the way up to the Antarctica and Arctic, okay, on trees, just below the permanent snow line of high mountains. One species actually grows submerged in rocks and salt water. Okay. And some even grow in glass, concrete, and asbestos. They even grow in asbestos. Can you believe it? Okay. Now the thallus is 3 to 4 layers of cells or hyphae. Remember, hyphae are components of fungi. So you have the upper cortex. You have the algal layer, usually under that, the medulla, the lower cortex, and lichens are grouped into 3 growth forms, okay? These growth forms have no basis in natural relationships, but it's convenient as a first step in helping to identify the lichen, okay? So the first type is crustose lichens, okay? They grow attached or embedded in a substrate over their lower surface. Okay, they're oftentimes brightly colored, okay, crusty patches on rocks and tree bark. Okay, so here over on the right is a crustose lichen. The one over on the left is a foliose lichen, which we'll come up to in a little bit. I'm sorry, it's a fruticose lichen. This is a foliose lichen, okay? So foliose lichens have leaf-like thalli which can overlap, okay? And they tend to be weakly attached to their substrates. Their edges are often wrinkled or divided into lobes. Okay, so we have the crustose lichens, we have the foliose lichens, and we have the fruticose lichens. Okay, so they're shrub-like or they hang down. Okay, their thalli or body are cylindrical and attached at one point. They're branched. Okay. Now, the majority of lichens are not parasites, although there are a few that are parasitic, but majority are not. Okay, and they're usually dispersed asexually. Okay, asexually. About a third of the species are dispersed through structures called soredia. Okay, these are clusters of hyphae and algae. Okay, so they're dispersed by water oftentimes. Okay, rain. Okay, running water. They can be dispersed by wind. They can be dispersed by animals. Okay, so about a third are dispersed through soredia, and the others are dispersed through isidia, okay, which is a specialized part of the thallus, okay, that can kind of break off, okay, specialized part of the thallus that can break off or are separated by decay from the rest of the thallus. Okay. Now, lichens are exceptionally sensitive to pollution, especially pollution by sulfur dioxide. Okay. In fact, their sensitivity is so great. That they can be used as indicators to the amount of sulfur dioxide in the air just by the disappearance or the appearance of a particular lichen in the environment. Okay? Now another thing too is that they're sensitive to radiation. Okay, so they were used to monitor radiation when a satellite fell in a kind of uninhabited region, a kind of remote region on Earth. Okay, and after the nuclear reactor melted down in Chernobyl, okay, what they did is they found out that the lichens that reindeer ate actually were contaminated with radiation, and the reindeer meat was unfit for human consumption because it had unacceptable levels of radiation. So they're very, very good indicators of pollution and radiation. They're very sensitive. Okay. Another thing is that they degrade ruins and other rocks. Okay. So Troy in Turkey and Machu Picchu have been damaged by lichens. Okay, because acids are produced by lichens, so they're the part of the lichens that have damaged these very famous historic places and tourist attractions. Okay, they serve as food for reindeer and caribou. Okay, in fact, these reindeer and caribou can survive on lichens alone. Okay, when there's no other food available. Okay, when there's no other things to browse on or graze on there. North African sheep also eat lichens, but lichens are not good for people, even though people have eaten lichens before, but they tend to be not good for people. I think that they can cause stomachache. They're not easily digested by humans. Okay. So there's about half of the lichens have antibiotic properties. Okay. They were used in Europe with other antibiotics for tuberculosis. Okay. They're also used for salves, for cuts and skin diseases. Okay. They've also been used for dyes for Greeks and Romans. Okay. Also Native Americans use them for dyes. Okay. And in fact, the author of the text actually talks about somebody in his class actually making dyes from lichens and being so enthusiastic about how beautiful the colors were. Okay? And lichens are still used for dyes for Scottish tweeds, which are a very kind of statusy sort of kind of clothes, right? And East Indian cottons. Okay? It's also been used as litmus paper, as an acid alkaline indicator, with red, of course, indicating acid, and blue indicating alkaline. Okay. They have also been used in soaps and perfumes, okay, from extracts from lichens. Okay. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go and do another demo. Okay, so we'll go here. Okay, and what we have here are some lichens. Okay, so here we go. Okay, here's what's left of a very good example of a crustose lichen. Okay, these are actually preserved specimens, so they're not alive, as far as I know. Even though there are some lichens that you can actually live all crumpled up for years and decades and like that, and still get resuscitated if you wet them with water. Okay. Anyway, so this is a crustose lichen. So you see it's forming a crust on the surface of the bark of this piece of wood. Okay. And here's a good example of a foliose lichen. Okay, you can see that the body, the thallus, is lobed. Okay, it has these ins and outs, and it's kind of wrinkled and crinkled at the edges. Okay. And here you have what's left of a foliose lichen. So they're like little bushes. Okay, they actually stand up a little bit sometimes. Okay, so some of them even have some coloring still in them. I think this foliose lichen was originally like a light greenish color from the algae that helped make it up. Okay, okay, let's go back to the station here. Okay, anyway, that finishes our survey of the fungi and doing the lichens. Okay, I like that, doing the lichens. Okay, Next, what we're going to do, we're going to get into the plant kingdom. Okay, we're going to actually start by talking about plants in general. Then if we have time, we might get into the bryophytes. Okay, the kingdom plantae. Okay. All right, so plants, of course, develop from algae. We learned this earlier. Okay. Kingdom plantae develop from algae. Remember, algae are protistans, right? So on land, the plants are kept from drying out. Okay. So for one thing, the surfaces of the plant that's in contact with the air is coated with a cuticle. Remember that waxy yellow buildup? I'm just kidding. That waxy layer on the outside of the plant. Okay. Yeah, and what this cuticle does is waxy and it's oil-based, so it retards water loss from the plant. Okay. Another feature of the kingdom plantae is you have gametangia and sporangia, where you have gamete-producing structures or sperm and egg-producing structures, and you have spore-producing structures. Okay, gametangia and sporangia. Okay. You also have the fact that generally the kingdom plantae organisms are multicellular. Okay, and what they have is they have this jacket. Okay, that actually shields the zygotes that develop into embryos. Okay, so what these embryos are immature plantlets. Okay, but they're within parental tissues. They actually have a maternal investment into the next generation, just like sort of like people with the placenta and then the baby inside the womb. Okay. So in the kingdom plantae, you have a maternal investment. So plant zygotes develop into embryos, and that didn't happen in any of the earlier organisms that we've been surveying. You know, from the bacteria into the protistans and into the fungi. Okay. Okay, now plants are more complex and varied than those kingdoms that we've been examining previously. Okay, the tissues are more specialized, okay, for these various functions, for photosynthesis, for conduction of water and nutrients, and also food, for support, for anchorage, and for protection. Okay, look at these beautiful plants. They're all flowering plants. Okay. Okay. Now in the plants, the sporophyte phases are predominant in more advanced groups. Now this actually looks like, can't see. It actually looks like some kind of grass. So the sporophyte phases are predominant in more advanced groups. Okay. The reproduction is mainly sexual, even though they can also reproduce asexually, as we have seen before. Okay. And there are no multicellular embryos in the discussed groups that we've discussed so far. Okay. So this was recognized in past classifications when all living things were in two kingdoms, plant and animal. Okay. So you had the plantae and the animalia. All right. When Linnaeus was doing his work in the 1700s. Okay, so the plantae is subdivided, right, into two subkingdoms, or the plantae were subdivided into two subkingdoms. Okay, we had the thallophyta, okay, which included the bacteria, the protistans, and the fungi. So remember that these have a body, like a body that's kind of basic. You know that they don't have distinguishing organs, okay? Whereas the embryophyta are the others, except for the animals. So the animals are all off by themselves. So your embryophyta means embryo plants. Thallophyta means thallus plants, okay? So a thallus is actually like an undifferentiated body that is not differentiated into organs, like limu have, like fungi have, okay? And then you have the embryophyta, which are all the others, so there's all the plants, okay? Now, the bryophytes are the non-vascular plants. Okay, that means that they do not have vascular tissue. Okay, they include the phylum Hepaticophyta, or the liverworts. Okay, they include the Anthocerophyta, or the hornworts. Okay, and you also have the Bryophyta, which are the mosses. Okay, so in terms of the bryophytes, the non-vascular plants, in World War I, there was heavy fighting, okay, in France, and the nurses ran out of cotton bandages to bind up the wounds of the soldiers that were injured, okay. So in desperation, they actually turned to this kind of green plant material that they found growing near the edges of a lake that was nearby, okay. To their amazement, they found out that this substance actually decreased the amount of infection that the soldiers got and helped them, speed them to recovery, okay? So this plant was actually sphagnum moss. And sphagnum moss is known for its antiseptic properties, probably because it's acid. It's a little bit acid. They live in like acid environment, and they themselves are acid. So even plant propagators and people who do plants, not only for human bandages, but also for plants, you can grow plants in them, and you don't actually have as many fungi or as many bacteria, you know, coming and propagating in there as you would ordinarily, okay? So there are about 23,000 species of bryophytes. Nice pictures here. That looks like Marcantia there on the left, okay? And they do not have true xylem and phloem, okay? They often have mycorrhizae. Remember, we were just talking about mycorrhizae. They often have mycorrhizae associated with little things called rhizoids, which are not true roots, okay? Like all need water to do sex, okay? Even though there are some species with unisexual plants, some with bisexual plants, okay? And they generally need the water, either dew or rain, to actually do sexual reproduction, okay? So alternation of generations is conspicuous in the bryophytes. Remember alternation of generations? So the bryophytes are monophyletic. That means that they're from a common ancestor, okay? So the liverworts are sisters to mosses. It's a thalloid liverwort. And hornworts are basal to mosses. That means that probably mosses might have descended from hornworts, okay? All these three groupings have similar life cycles and growth habits, okay? And so the groupings are based on structure and reproduction, and in this way they're separated into three distinct phyla, okay? The Hepaticophyta, the Anthocerophyta, and the Bryophyta. Okay, phylum Hepaticophyta, which means liverworts. Okay, like hepatitis, liver, right? So W-O-R-T, wort, just means plant or herb. I think it's Anglo-Saxon. Okay, so generally, since medieval times, okay, some of them have these liver-shaped lobes. Okay, liver-shaped lobes, and through the doctrine of signatures that was active during medieval times, they thought that these plants were useful for liver disease. Okay, it's just like the idea that if you eat a walnut, because walnut is shaped like a brain, it's good for brain illnesses. Okay, so there are about 8,000 species of liverworts known. Okay, and the thalloid liverworts, which here is a nice picture of, okay, comprise about 20% of the species, and the so-called leafy liverworts comprise about 80% of the species, okay? Now the gametophytes develop from spores, okay? So these gametophytes actually in their thallus or leafy stages. Okay, so this structure here is actually a gametophyte. Okay, this part here, the obvious structure, are gametophytes. So the gametophytes are dominant, okay, in these groups. Okay, so the gametophytes develop from spores. And what do you notice about this? What color is it? Or are they? They're green, so they do photosynthesis. Okay. The lower surfaces under here, you have rhizoids, okay, which are root-like structures. Okay, the rhizoids anchor the plant. Okay, and also the growth is prostrate, so the plant just kind of creeps along, lying down. It's not erect; it doesn't stand up. Okay. Now the thyroid liverworts, the most well-known of all the thyroid liverworts are Marchantia species. Okay. So what happens is that the thallus, okay, forks dichotomously. That means that you can see that here, 1, 2, that the thallus actually grows and it forks into 2 parts, and then this will grow and fork into 2 parts. Okay. So each branch has like a notch in it, okay, at the apex, and a central groove. You can see the groove here, right? That extends lengthwise, okay? And the meristem cells are at the notch, okay? And they divide. Okay, the older growth decays as the newer growth kind of comes along. This is actually female gametophores. So this is actually a female gametophyte, because in this Marchantia species you have male gametophytes and female gametophytes. Okay, let's go into asexual reproduction. Okay, you have these structures called gemmy. Okay, these are tiny pieces detached from the thallus. They're kind of lens-shaped. Okay, and these gemmy are produced in gemmy cups. Okay. And the rain can splash them 3 feet away. That's great. This is the bottom of the rhizoids. Yeah. Anyway, rain can splash them 3 feet away. Okay. So then each gemma is capable of growing into a new thallus. Okay. Okay. Let's see. I think that does it for today. We kind of finished up on the fungi, we talked about the lichens, and we started on the plants. Okay? So I hope that you've enjoyed yourself. I have enjoyed myself. And until next time, aloha.